Hello, it's Wednesday the 18th of December. I hope everyone's okay because today's been pretty wild. So the Fed basically gave us a bit of a tape bomb today, a bit unexpected, and it was a very kind of hawkish rate cut, if you like. The reason is that they altered the dot plot and the inflation rate expectations, and basically they changed the end of the year target Fed funds rate to 3.9%, and in September only it was 3.4%. So that's 0.5% change in not very much time. And the market, and basically he said, therefore, that any more further rate cuts are kind of on hold. So until that improves, and that means that the entire rally from when he started the rate cut cycle on August the 5th basically is done until things change. So let's take a look at where we are in the S&P, because let's zoom out here. So basically this is our year, which is an extremely lovely bullish year, all the way from January. Here is the August the 5th bottom, where we made a lovely 3-wave correction into it and 5-wave rally out of it. It looks like, I'm not sure it's complete, but that basically means that this rate cut cycle from here is kind of on a pause until things start improving with inflation or something breaks. That's what the Fed tends to do. So if we look at previous corrections, for example, this correction that we did here in October, you can see that we pulled back to the previous swing low and we pulled back to the daily 50 moving average, and that's where we bounce from. And that's kind of what we've done here again. We've pulled back to the mid-November low, we've pulled back to the daily 50 moving average. It doesn't look like doesn't look like we're going to close above it as we did here, but this particularly is interesting support because of this previous swing low, and also because if I measure back to this 5th of August bottom that we made here, it's also the 236 fib level, and very often the first time back towards this 236 fib you will get a little bit of a bounce. So I'm expecting a little bit of a bounce, and the other reason I'm expecting a little bit of a bounce is because it's still options expiration week, and the stock index, although we've had the VIX expiration, which quite often leads to some weakness afterwards, I think that we may bounce into Friday, which is when the stock index's options expire, and also that Friday is when the Bitcoin options expire. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Bitcoin to attempt a bounce either. This is kind of one of those levels where we're likely to try one. It's also, if we look left, pretty interesting support and resistance. I know a lot of people were expecting that a rally into year end and calling it a Santa rally. I have to say that Santa rallies tend to happen after Christmas, before New Year. And so a little bit of a pullback next week sets us up really nicely for a pretty good post-Christmas Santa rally, if you like. Let's take a look at the NASDAQ, which is most correlated with crypto, and you can see also in this one we have pulled back to the highs from the beginning of November and the lows from mid-month, so a pretty interesting support and resistance level. If we measure from the August turning point when the Fed started this cutting cycle here in the NASDAQ, from this low to high, you can see we've actually got a room to go a little bit lower here before we get to this 236 fib retrace level here on the daily in the NASDAQ. So we're not quite here. 21,228 then is likely to be support, but where we are bouncing very nicely is the daily 20 moving average. And if I take this away, you can see previously this has been pretty good bounce support. So although this is a really big nasty daily reversal candle, if you are longing quite a lot of stuff, and this is the kind of level where we are going to attempt to bounce, we may only get halfway back of this drop into Friday before we continue lower. In fact, I think it is quite likely that that happens, but we should, this isn't a good place to be selling. The move is done. There were some really interesting reversals in some important stocks. So MicroStrategy, remember we looked at this earlier in the week. With this ABC correction here in the middle, this was all pointing lower, and in MicroStrategy we haven't quite got back down to, although we're testing the previous lows from November here. So we might attempt a little bit of a bounce here before Friday. We haven't quite got to our ideal support level, which is down at 318 yet. And I think that there is therefore room for us to go a little bit lower in MicroStrategy at least. And if we drop underneath that and underneath this daily 50, we could go lower on that. For this stock, for a stock to pull back this much, when you think that we're already down 30 something percent in this stock, it's quite volatile. It's not for the faint-hearted, is it? There were some quite interesting, if we take a look at some other stocks that were performing really well. For example, this is a weekly chart of Google, and this was trading and holding at new highs, and this now has reversed that false breakout. This is just a weekly chart. You can see on the daily, we had quite a few days above this previous high, and that's all reversed now into a little bit of a false breakout. And this is starting to look like a big three-wave correction. So first swing lower, a flat correction, in other words, because we can't, if we don't close above this previous high. So we go 1, 2, 3 basically, and a bigger fall coming in this. And a few stocks did this as well. For example, we looked at Google, Tesla. Now Tesla actually is not quite so bearish, and the reason is that we are well above the 2021 highs, and although we were down 11% in this stock, and in terms of a 3-day candlestick pattern, this is pretty bearish. I think a bounce should be sold in this one, and we've got further to fall to 414, but we are still holding well above these previous highs. And this isn't, this is a pullback in a really strong uptrend. This really isn't in terms of, hasn't quite pulled back enough to support level, but it's also not a big trend reversal either in this one, because it had literally pushed so far. So these are the stocks that are kind of most correlated with crypto. Let's take a look at what's going on in crypto, because Bitcoin fell pretty nastily, but remember this in Bitcoin, let's go to the 4-hour chart and go back. And if we look back to November, for quite a long time now, we've been making very choppy 3-wave moves in Bitcoin. So from the high at the end of November, 1, 2, 3 down, 1, 2, 3 up, 1, 2, 3, funny flat one here, down, and the same way here. And then this pullback is also an exact equal measured move where we bounce from. So that means I've measured from the high on the 17th here. This is a 4-hour chart to the low, to the low early hours this morning, and then this drop, equal measured move, and a back test of this 100,000 level. It's not quite a 50% retrace from this low to high, which means there is room for us to retest this low or maybe squeak a little bit lower. But I think only underneath kind of 99,700 are we likely to see a bigger drop to the bottom of this range, and to 94. So if you're kind of a bit too heavily loaded long, then expect a bounce here. And I think we should back test this 102 level. We might, stay in this range. And the reason is that we don't, in the deribit, although we've got the new ETF options that expire on Friday, most of the volume is still in the deribit options, which don't expire until the 27th. And last month we said that the gamma and they were most likely to keep us, the market makers, in between 100,000 and 90,000. And as we came into the options expiration, which was here, that's exactly what they did, and they pinned us in the middle. So the high here was 99,800, I think. The low here was 90,500, so they kept us in this range. This time the gamma's moved higher, and kind of in between 110 and 100. And so I think I wouldn't be surprised if they keep us in this sideways range between 100 and 110, and we go from there. And so I'm not, I can look at stocks and say, gosh, I think we're going much further. And what that also means is if we do fall underneath 100,000, it could get a little bit leery, because everybody has to re-hedge and rearrange things. So for now, though, I do think that that's the kind of sideways range that we might stay in. Now, I'm going to be, when you get a measured move, so if we get down to, let's stay on this 4 hour. So if I measure from this high to this low and project it from here, and here's our equal measured move level, 101.93. For me, we're going to be bullish and we're going to see a bigger bounce if we close back up above this 61.8 level, which is 102.148. That's why I've got my green arrow there. Because if we trade back above that, and if we trade back above that price and hold above it, we are likely, the most common retrace of a 3-wave equal measured move like this is a 786 fib level. So if we trade back above that level, and I know I do this pattern all the time, if we measure from this high to low here, I'm just going to take this away. First place we're going to look for is the 50%. We might have a little bit of wobble here in the middle, which is at 104.200, but really my first target is going to be up here at 106.500. That's the second target. So, you know, that's just how these patterns tend to work. So above 102.100, 104.200, and then 106.500. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if we get stuck and trade sideways with these 3-wave, you know, patterns that we're in. I wouldn't be surprised if we trade sideways next week in this range. And if we get out of this range, yes, it might get a little bit leery on the downside. But I think, you know, dips are to be bought, and it will, if we are going to see a really nice end of year rally in Bitcoin, it will be from the 27th, which is a week on Friday. And yeah, then we should see a really nice move into year end from there. So that's what I'm going to be looking for Bitcoin. Now, quite a lot of these had really nice, nasty moves. And one of them that had a really nasty move was Solana. And so when I looked at this, I'm thinking, no, this isn't looking very good. Here we are underneath our daily 50 moving average. Are we going to retest this 236 fib? Is it going to break this time? And I have to say, when I go down a time frame and I have a look at where we are potentially at a bounce level in this one as well, because we've also got this equal measured move thing going on here. Even if I measure down to this lowest low on here, look, high to low, 3-wave rally. Here we are at the equal measured move level, holding 205 in Solana. It's not bouncing quite as nicely as Bitcoin yet, but what that also means is if Solana trades back above 214, which is this 61.8 level again, we're likely to see a bigger bounce, and this will be a bigger A, B, C. So that's going to be the key level, 214, if Solana's going to go higher. And if we bounce from here, and you just want to get out because you don't like it, 214, it's kind of the bull bear line. If we can't and we get stuck underneath there, you know, we are likely to make a retest of the lows. It might not look so pretty and stay heavy. So 214 is really key resistance that we need to get above if we're going to continue higher, and then we go back towards 230 and potentially, you know, higher than that 240 level, back to the middle of this range. And if we get underneath, so that would be pretty bullish, but if we get underneath this 204 level and get stuck underneath it, we kind of set ourselves up for a bigger pullback in Solana. So that's how I'm looking at that one. I looked at Ripple yesterday because with a more in detail video. Sure enough, we had our reversal, and we said if we reversed at the 786 here, our first target was this 38.2. That's where we tagged and we bounced from. We've done a 3-wave measured move here in Ripple. We really are, you know, this is not bearish. This is a correction. This is sideways chop. And unless you're trading at short term, you can get chopped up in it, and you need to be careful. So we've made a 3-wave measured move here. So we normally, when you do this, go to the 38 point, you expect to go back to the middle. Because this is, you know, a 3-wave pattern, we could likely go all the way up here, maybe back towards this 786 retrace of this move that we made like this, but it's choppy. We've now got, look, 4-hour completely flat moving averages basically for a week now. If we look at where we are on the daily, this is pretty good support though, this daily 20 moving average. So we're still going sideways in Ripple. Yes. So the answer, which we asked a couple of days ago or yesterday was, is this a new upswing or are we still in a sideways correction? We are still in a sideways correction in Ripple, and we are potentially setting ourselves, by holding it and going sideways like this, setting ourselves up really nicely for a year-end Santa rally, hopefully, in this one as well. It's not a bearish reversal, but it's not, we are not going higher yet. Now, ETH, like Solana, had a really nasty move today. Just put my regular candles on in this one. And because we've got this big double top level, slightly higher high, this is one of the ones where I don't think we've quite pulled back to our ideal support in ETH. And I think we've got a little bit further to fall. I'm looking at a 4-hour chart, but if we look at it on the daily, this is the first time also, this is the first time that we've closed underneath this daily 20 moving average. It was support at the end of November. It was support when we pulled back into it last Thursday. On Monday. It was support when we pulled back into it on Monday the 9th, and here we are underneath it. And so this potentially does set us up to fall further into support, and therefore our resistance is going to be a back test of this 20 moving average as well. But if everything else, I have to say, has got little cute ABC corrections going on, let's take a look at ETH and see if we haven't got the same here. Kind of don't like this because I can't really see a clear in the middle here. I don't know, I can actually now. I look at this, I can see, I always like the B leg to see, I can see 3 waves in it, and then I kind of trust it a little bit more. So I wouldn't be surprised, you know, high tide floats all the boats, right? So if they're all going to bounce, so is ETH. And then we really need to see if we can get above this 3,750 and that daily 20 moving average. Otherwise, I'm afraid I think this one has further to fall. There are no options yet on the ETH ETF to save this one, unfortunately. So if I measure from this high to low, and so we'll say we're just in a big sideways ABC correction here, I think we retest the lows at 3,500 on this bounce, and this bounce is a little bit to be sold. However, if I measure it potentially, yeah, we're not at the equal measured move level. That's at 3,600. So 3,600, 3,500, I think if you're looking for a bigger swing support in ETH is where we are likely to pull back to. So what else, you know, pretty much, you know, on a move like this, everything gets hurt. And if everything's going to bounce, everything's going to bounce. There's a few things that don't really care about this. One of them is this is the Pengu, Pudgy Penguin token that's launched. Now this one, yeah, this is an hourly chart. So this really didn't have any shakeout. It's doing its own thing. If I measure from 0 to this high, I would argue that this is a lovely 61.8, 38.2. So we should bounce from here back up to 0.044. And then I would expect it to maybe have a little pullback to the middle and decide which way next. So, you know, this is doing its own thing, its own little uptrend here. If I move this fib retrace, I think I've got it locked. Let's unlock it. Put it here. Yeah, the fibs don't quite line up, which is why I've got it this way. But if when I'm not sure on a launch like this, I'll put it back to 0 and see if that lines up, and it certainly has with this Pudgy Penguins. But if we do this from retrace from the highs here, it's pretty interesting because this first one got rejected around this 236 fib. I think if we push above this 236 fib, it's at 0.0375. Next upside target is 0.044, and then a 50% if we keep going above 0.044 is 0.049. So this one, after a really nice nasty drop, looks like it's setting up for more. What would make it not so pretty or a fail would be a slight lower high and a roll lower here, or an unable to hold above that 0.0375 level. So that one's doing its own thing. But pretty much everything else, unfortunately, has had a really nasty shakeout and is likely to have a little bit of a bounce here. When I look at kind of all of the bigger all of the bigger altcoins have had pretty nasty shakeouts, but they're all at kind of potential bounce levels. Like, let's take a look at this one. This is Aave. Spent a long time. This is an hourly chart. Let's go up to a 4-hourly or a daily. You can see, just like Doge and Ripple and everything else, we've been in these sideways corrections. If we go down to a 4-hour chart though, here we have made in this one also a very nice little dead equal measured move correction. Now we could say, well, this was pretty strong support and resistance here. This is where we broke down, and if we make it, even if we make it as a horizontal level in this previous swing low, that becomes our resistance. So if we bounce here from 336, we can say back test of this 61.8. If we can hold above it, this one's going up again and we're going to be back in our sideways range. If not, this is a resistance and we're likely to pull back a little bit further in Aave. 353 then becomes a pretty important little bull bear line on this bounce for more upside. Because this is a textbook equal measure move, if we hold above this 353 level, my next upside target, I'm going to look for that 50% here in the middle, 367, and then the 786 is the most common at 386. So we do like, it should do like 3 waves, something like this, you know, just like Ripple did. And so many altcoins are the same. They are at bounce levels, and we'll see if they can turn the bounce into something bigger or not. And there's quite a lot of them making very similar patterns to this. Yeah, just across the board, pretty nasty shakeout, and we'll see what the bounce does tomorrow. Let me know if there's anything you'd like me to take a look at.